The crystal tumbler hit the marble floor with a sound like a gunshot in a cathedral. Silence descended over the private dining room of the Meridian, Seattle's most exclusive restaurant, where reservations were booked 18 months in advance and where the city's elite gathered behind velvet curtains and soundproofed walls. Ice cubes scattered across the polished stone like dice thrown by fate itself, and Marcus Webb, billionaire, CEO of Webb Industries, a man whose signature could move markets, stood frozen, his hands still extended in the shape that had held the glass moments before. The young waitress who had spoken those 7 words stood perfectly still, her serving tray balanced against her hip, her dark eyes wide with the realization that she had just shattered more than glassware. She was perhaps 22, with black hair pulled back in a regulation bun that couldn't quite contain the wild curls escaping at her temples, and she wore the standard uniform of the Meridian: black dress, white apron, polished shoes that squeaked slightly on the marble when she shifted her weight. Her name tag read, Elena Vasquez, in elegant script, but Marcus wasn't looking at her name tag. He was looking at the leather portfolio she'd been serving from, at the invoice tucked into its transparent sleeve, at the signature scrawled across the bottom in a handwriting he hadn't seen in 23 years. "What did you say?" Marcus's voice came out strangled, barely above a whisper. His dinner companions, 3 venture capitalists and a senator, had gone quiet, watching this unexpected drama unfold with the fascination of people who spent their lives insulated from genuine surprise. Elena's fingers tightened on the tray. She was already regretting her words, already calculating how much this job meant to her, how many months of community college tuition depended on her keeping her mouth shut and serving food with a smile and never, ever commenting on the business documents that passed through her hands. But it was too late now. The words were out there, hanging in the air like smoke, and she couldn't pull them back if this story moved you. If you connected with Elena's journey from loss to legacy, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories about justice, redemption, and the complicated ways we make peace with the past. Your support helps us tell stories that matter. Thank you for watching. I said. She cleared her throat, her voice steadier now, threaded with something that might have been defiance or might have been desperation. I said, "That's my dad's signature, sir. On that contract. I'd know his handwriting anywhere." Marcus bent down slowly, his expensive suit creaking slightly. Armani, tailored in Milan, probably worth more than Elena made in 6 months, and picked up one of the ice cubes from the floor. He held it in his palm, watching it melt against his skin, the cold shocking him back into the moment. Behind him, his chief financial officer, Patricia Chun, a woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes like a hawk's, had her phone out, already typing something with her thumbs. "Your father," Marcus repeated, the words careful, measured. "Your father's signature is on a materials contract for Webb Industries, dated 1998? "No, sir." Elena's hands were shaking now, making the empty wine glasses on her tray clink together like wind chimes. "His signature is on a design patent for the Webb Cascade System, filed March 15, 1998. The water filtration technology that made Webb Industries what it is today." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Senator Hartley, a man with a face like weathered granite who'd been halfway through a story about golf with the president, set down his fork with exaggerated care. The venture capitalists exchanged glances that carried entire conversations. Risk assessment, damage control, the scent of scandal that could either destroy fortunes or create them. Marcus straightened, and Elena noticed for the first time how tall he was, how his presence seemed to fill the room like water rising. He was 52, but looked 10 years younger, with thick dark hair graying at the temples and eyes the color of steel under storm clouds. His face was the kind that appeared on the covers of business magazines, usually with headlines like, "The Man Who Made Water Worth Billions," or, "From Garage Startup to Global Empire," the Marcus Webb story. That story, Elena knew, was a lie, or at least it wasn't the whole truth. "Patricia," Marcus said quietly, not taking his eyes off Elena. "Clear the room." "Marcus, we're in the middle of—" Senator Hartley began, but Patricia was already standing, already making small gestures toward the door that somehow carried the weight of absolute authority. "Gentlemen, if you'll excuse us," Patricia said smoothly, her voice like honey over steel. There's been a slight irregularity that requires immediate attention. Your meals will be comped, naturally, and we'll reschedule at your earliest convenience. Jenkins will show you to the lounge for after-dinner drinks. The men protested, but not much. People like Marcus Webb didn't issue orders that could be ignored, and whatever was happening here had the electric charge of something big, something that might explode if handled incorrectly. They filed out, taking their curiosity and their cell phones with them, though Elena knew at least one of them would be calling their publicist before they hit the parking lot. When the door closed, it was just the three of them. Marcus, Patricia, and Elena, who suddenly felt very young and very foolish standing there with her serving tray and her big mouth that had just upended her carefully constructed life. "Sit down," Marcus said, gesturing to one of the vacated chairs. "Sir, I have 4 other tables, and Mr. Delacroix is very particular about the timing of his courses, and—" "Elena!" The way he said her name made her stop. It wasn't angry or threatening. It was something else, something that sounded almost like recognition, like he was testing the syllables, seeing how they fit in his mouth. "Please, sit down." She sat, perching on the edge of the leather chair like a bird ready to fly, setting her tray on the table where it clinked softly against someone's unfinished creme brulee. Patricia remained standing, her phone dark now, her full attention focused on Elena with an intensity that made Elena want to shrink into the expensive upholstery. "Tell me about your father," Marcus said. He'd moved to the window, looking out over Elliott Bay where lights from ferries crawled across black water like luminous insects. His reflection in the glass looked ghostly, insubstantial, as if he might vanish if Elena spoke the wrong words. Elena took a breath that hurt going down. She'd told this story before to counselors and caseworkers and well-meaning teachers who all said the same things. "It's not your fault. Children aren't responsible for their parents. You have to let it go." But she'd never told it to the man who'd been there, who knew the truth of what happened even if the world believed something different. "His name was Rafael Vasquez," she began, and her voice only cracked a little. "He was an engineer. Brilliant, everyone said. He worked for small tech companies all through the 90s, always jumping from place to place because he had ideas that were too big, too weird, too ahead of their time. My mom used to joke that he was born in the wrong decade, that he should have been working at Bell Labs in the 50s when they were inventing the future." Patricia had produced a tablet from somewhere and was typing notes with quick, efficient movements. Marcus didn't turn from the window. In 1997, he developed a water filtration system. Elena continued, the words coming faster now, like a dam breaking. It used ceramic membranes with nanoparticle coatings that could remove contaminants at a molecular level while using a fraction of the energy of traditional systems. He was obsessed with it. He thought it could bring clean water to developing countries, disaster zones, anywhere traditional infrastructure couldn't reach. He called it the Cascade System because of how the water flowed through multiple filtration stages, each one building on the last. "The Webb Cascade System," Marcus said quietly, still not turning. "The technology that launched Webb Industries. The technology that's now in use in 47 countries. That's brought clean water to over 200 million people." "Yes." The word came out bitter. "Except it wasn't your technology, was it, Mr. Webb?" Now he turned, and his face was unreadable. A mask of careful neutrality that Elena suspected he'd spent decades perfecting. "What happened to your father, Elena?" She'd known he would ask. She'd been building toward this answer since the moment she'd opened her mouth, since the moment she'd recognized that signature on the document that Marcus had been showing off to his dinner guests like a trophy from a war he'd won. But knowing didn't make it easier to say. "He partnered with you," Elena said. 1997. "You were nobody then, just another guy with an MBA and a garage full of equipment and big dreams about changing the world. He showed you his designs, his prototypes, his research. You told him you could handle the business side while he focused on engineering. You said you'd be 50-50 partners. You shook hands on it. He trusted you." Patricia's typing had stopped. The room was so quiet Elena could hear her own heartbeat, could hear the distant clatter of the kitchen 2 floors below, could hear the city breathing beyond the windows. "And then," Elena continued, her voice hardening, "in March 1998, You filed for the patents. All of them. Every design, every innovation, every piece of technology my father had spent 3 years developing. You filed them under Webb Industries, a corporation you'd created 3 months earlier without telling him. You listed yourself as the sole inventor. And when he confronted you, when he showed up at your office with his own copies of the designs, his own notebooks full of calculations and diagrams, you told him he was confused. You told him he'd been a consultant, nothing more. You told him to get a lawyer if he didn't like it. Elena, Marcus started. But she was on a roll now, years of stored anger pouring out like water from a broken seal. He did get a lawyer, a public defender, because that's all we could afford. You had a team from Patterson and Blake, one of the biggest firms in Seattle. The case never even went to trial. Your lawyers buried him in paperwork, in depositions, in motions and countermotions until he couldn't afford to keep fighting. He lost his job because he was spending all his time on the lawsuit. We lost our house. My mom had to take 3 jobs just to keep us fed. And my father. Her voice broke, and she hated herself for it. Hated that this man could still make her cry after all these years. My father fell apart. Completely. He started drinking, stopped sleeping, would spend whole nights in the garage working on designs that would never see the light of day, talking to himself, sometimes crying. I was 7 years old, Mr. Webb. 7 years old. Watching my father disintegrate because you stole everything he'd worked for and left him with nothing. Marcus had gone very pale. He moved to the table, pulled out a chair, sat down heavily like his strings had been cut. Patricia set down her tablet and poured water from a crystal pitcher into a clean glass, slid it across to him. He didn't drink it. Where is he now? Marcus asked. Your father. Where is Rafael? Elena met his eyes, and in hers was an ocean of grief and rage and something else, something harder and colder. He's dead, Mr. Webb. He killed himself on my 10th birthday, March 15th, 2001. Exactly 3 years after you filed those patents. He left a note that was just 1 sentence. I'm sorry I couldn't give you the world. And then he walked into Elliott Bay with rocks in his pockets. And they didn't find his body for 6 days. The glass of water Patricia had poured sat untouched, reflecting the chandelier light like a contained galaxy. Outside, a fairy horn sounded, low and mournful. Marcus's hands were flat on the table, and Elena noticed they were trembling, just slightly. A tremor that might have been age or emotion or the weight of words that couldn't be unsaid. I need you to understand something, Marcus said finally, and his voice was different now, stripped of its authority, just a man speaking to another human being across a chasm of pain. I need you to understand that I never meant. He stopped, started again. The story, you know, Elena. It's not the whole story. Then tell me the whole story, Elena said. Tell me how you sleep at night in your penthouse apartment while my mother cleans offices for minimum wage. Tell me how you accept awards for innovation while my father's name isn't mentioned anywhere in your company's history. Tell me how you look at yourself in the mirror and see anything but a thief. Patricia cleared her throat softly. Marcus, I should advise you that anything said in this conversation could potentially be used. I don't care, Marcus interrupted, his eyes still locked on Elena's. I don't care about legal liability or damage control or stock prices. This woman deserves the truth. Her father deserved the truth. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was almost too quiet to hear. Rafael Vasquez was my best friend. And what happened to him has haunted me every single day for 23 years. If the story moved you, if you connected with Elena's journey from loss to legacy, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories about justice, redemption, and the complicated ways we make peace with the past. Your support helps us tell stories that matter. Thank you for reading. Elena felt the floor shift beneath her, felt the careful architecture of her anger crack and splinter. What? Marcus stood, walked back to the window, pressed his forehead against the cool glass. We met in college. University of Washington, 1991. I was studying business, he was in the engineering program. We were roommates sophomore year, randomly assigned, and we couldn't have been more different. He was brilliant, creative, always drawing designs in the margins of his notebooks. I was practical, organized, good with numbers and people. We balanced each other out. He used to joke that I was his left brain and he was my right brain, and together we made one functional human being. Patricia had gone very still, listening with an intensity that suggested this was news to her too, that whatever Marcus was about to reveal had been locked away for longer than anyone knew. After graduation, we stayed close. He'd show me his projects. I'd help him figure out funding and business models. When he told me about the Cascade System, I knew immediately it was revolutionary. I'd never seen him so excited about anything. He said it was going to change everything, that we were going to change everything together. Marcus's voice cracked slightly, and he cleared his throat. So we became partners. Officially. 50-50, just like you said. I set up Webb Industries, named it after myself because he insisted. Said his name wouldn't mean anything to investors, but mine had that Anglo sound that opened doors. We were going to change the name later once we were established. Make it Webb Vasquez Industries. It was all planned out. Then what happened? Elena asked, though part of her didn't want to know. Didn't want this neat narrative of villainy to get complicated. Didn't want to feel anything for this man except the clean, pure anger she'd carried for so long. Life happened, Marcus said. Real, messy, complicated life. In December 1997, I met Catherine. My wife. Ex-wife now, but that's another story. She was a patent attorney at Patterson and Blake, brilliant and beautiful and way out of my league. We fell in love fast. Too fast, probably. By February, she was pregnant. We got married in a courthouse with Rafael as my best man. And Catherine. She looked at our business structure and he paused, choosing his words carefully. She got worried. Said that 50-50 partnerships were legal nightmares waiting to happen. Said we needed to formalize everything, get proper documentation, and protect everyone's interests. Patricia made a soft sound, and Elena saw understanding dawning on the older woman's face. The pieces clicking together into a picture that was both worse and different than what anyone had imagined. She offered to help, Marcus continued, his words coming faster now, like he'd been holding them in for decades and they were finally breaking free. Said she'd draw up partnership agreements, incorporation papers, patent filings, everything we needed to make Webb Industries legitimate. She'd do it pro bono, just charge us for filing fees. Rafael and I both agreed. We trusted her. I trusted her. He turned from the window, and his face was ravaged, years of guilt etched in every line. What I didn't know, what I didn't find out until years later, was that Catherine was drowning in gambling debts. $50,000 she'd lost at the Tulip Casino over the previous year. She was desperate, terrified of being disbarred if it came out. And she saw an opportunity. No, Elena whispered, but she was already seeing it, already understanding where this was going. She filed the patents in my name only, Marcus said. Created corporate documents that listed me as sole founder and CEO. She did it all while I was focused on a big investor pitch, while Rafael was working 20-hour days perfecting the prototype. By the time we realized what had happened, it was done. Legally, irrevocably done. But you could have fixed it, Elena said, standing now, her hands balled into fists. You could have refiled or given him shares or... I tried. Marcus's voice rose, then fell again. God, Elena, I tried. I went to Rafael immediately, told him there'd been a mistake, and said we'd fix it. But Catherine... He stopped, pressed his fingers against his eyes. She told me if I changed anything, if I tried to unwind what she'd done, she'd report herself to the Bar Association and take me down with her. Said she'd claim I'd known about it all along, that we'd conspired to defraud Rafael together. I was 26 years old, about to be a father, and I was terrified, so I made a choice. I told Rafael we'd handle it quietly, that we'd draw up a new agreement once the patents were approved, that it was just temporary. He believed you, Elena said, and it wasn't a question. At first, yes, but weeks turned into months, and I kept making excuses, and Rafael started to get suspicious. He started asking harder questions. I wanted to see documentation. I wanted to talk to a lawyer of his own. And Catherine. Marcus's hands clenched. Catherine panicked. She convinced me that if Rafael pushed this, if he hired a lawyer and started digging, everything would come out. The debts, the fraud, all of it. She'd lose her career. We'd lose everything. Our daughter. She'd been born by then, little Sarah. We'd lose her. So you threw him under the bus? Patricia said quietly, and there was disappointment in her voice, in the set of her shoulders. I stalled him, Marcus corrected, but it sounded like the same thing. I kept putting him off, making excuses, until he finally got fed up and hired that public defender. And then Catherine's firm, her partners, who didn't know anything about what she'd done, they crushed him, buried him in paperwork exactly like you said. I told myself I was just buying time, that eventually I'd figure out how to make it right. But then, he looked at Elena, and in his eyes was something that might have been pleading. Then Rafael started falling apart. Started drinking, missing meetings, showing up to the office smelling like whiskey and talking about conspiracies. He was making it easy for people to believe he was just a disgruntled employee, someone who'd convinced himself he'd contributed more than he had. Even I started to wonder sometimes if I was remembering things right, if maybe the partnership hadn't been as equal as I thought. That's called gaslighting, Elena said coldly. And it killed him. Yes, Marcus agreed, simply and without defense. It did. And I will carry that for the rest of my life. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the ventilation system, the distant murmur of the restaurant continuing its evening below them, people eating and laughing and conducting business, none of them knowing that upstairs, in this private room, the foundation of an empire was cracking. Elena's mind was racing. This wasn't the story she'd expected. She'd come here tonight expecting to serve food and collect tips and go home to the apartment she shared with 2 roommates and her mother, who still worked 3 jobs even though Elena was doing her best to help. She'd expected to see that signature. She'd seen it on documents before, had recognized Webb Industries' involvement in some contract, and felt that familiar burn of anger. She hadn't expected this. Hadn't expected complexity, hadn't expected Marcus Webb to have a face instead of being just a symbol, hadn't expected him to be human. But her father was still dead. That fact remained solid and immovable. Why are you telling me this now? She asked. Why not 20 years ago, when it might have mattered? Marcus moved to the table where the contract still lay, the one with Rafael's signature that had started this entire unraveling. He picked it up carefully like it might burn him. Because I'm dying, he said simply. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. They gave me 6 months, maybe a year if the treatment works. And I've spent those months thinking about legacy, about what I'll leave behind. Webb Industries will continue. I've got good people in place, patents that'll sustain the company for decades. But that's not the legacy that matters. What matters is the truth. What matters is that Rafael Vasquez's name be remembered, that his contribution be acknowledged, that his daughter. He looked at Elena, really looked at her, and she saw he was crying, tears running silently down his face. That his daughter knows her father was brilliant and kind and trusting, and that he was betrayed by someone who called him friend. Elena felt her own tears then, hot and angry and confused. She'd lived her whole adult life with a clear villain, a simple story of theft and injustice. Now that story was complicated, messy, full of shades of gray that didn't resolve into easy answers. She didn't know what to do with this information, how to carry it alongside the grief she'd been holding for 15 years. Patricia was looking at Marcus with an expression Elena couldn't quite read. Compassion mixed with calculation, the face of someone who was already 3 steps ahead, already planning what came next. There's more, Patricia said, speaking for the first time in several minutes. Isn't there, Marcus? That's why you asked me here tonight. Marcus nodded. Elena, I can't give you back your father. I can't undo the pain I caused, the childhood you lost, the years your mother spent breaking herself to keep you afloat. But I can give you something. Webb Industries was built on Rafael's designs, on his brilliance. That means it's half yours. Should have been half yours all along. Elena's breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying that I'm going to set things right, Marcus said. or as right as they can be at this point. I'm going to issue a public statement acknowledging Rafael Vasquez as co-creator of the Cascade System and founding partner of Webb Industries. I'm going to establish a scholarship fund in his name for engineering students. And I'm going to transfer 50% of my personal shares in Webb Industries to you. Not the company's shares, those stay where they are to keep things stable. But my shares, the ones that make me a majority shareholder and give me control, they're yours. The room spun. Elena gripped the edge of the table, trying to process numbers that her brain couldn't quite compute. Webb Industries was worth, what? Billions? She didn't even know. She'd spent so long thinking of it as the thing that had destroyed her family that she'd never considered it as an actual entity with actual value. She couldn't finish the sentence. That's insane. You can't just... People will ask questions, investors will. Let them ask, Marcus said. I'm dying anyway. What are they going to do, fire me? I'll be gone in 6 months, and the company will be fine. Better than fine, with you and Patricia running it. I'm a waitress. Elena's voice rose, verging on hysteria. I'm a community college student with $30,000 in debt, and no idea how to run a company worth billions. I don't. You're Rafael Vasquez's daughter? Patricia said firmly, and there was steel in her voice. The same steel that had built a career at one of the most ruthless companies in America. You're smart. I can see that. You're brave. You spoke up tonight when 99% of people would have kept their mouths shut. And you have something most people at the top lack. You know what it's like to struggle. You know what it's like when systems fail, when powerful people take advantage, when justice is too expensive to afford. That makes you exactly the kind of person who should have power. Elena looked between them. Marcus with his dying man's desperation for redemption. Patricia with her calculating certainty. She thought of her mother, Louisa, who would be getting off her night shift cleaning office buildings in about 3 hours, who would come home smelling like industrial disinfectant and collapse into bed for 4 hours before waking to her day job at the grocery store. She thought of her father, Rafael, who died believing his life's work had amounted to nothing, who drowned himself in Elliott Bay with the weight of failure dragging him down. She thought of the signature on that contract. Strong, confident strokes that she'd know anywhere because she'd spent years studying it, memorizing it from the few documents her mother had kept. The precious scraps of evidence that her father had been real, had been brilliant, had been worthy of being remembered. I need time, she said finally. I need to think. I need to talk to my mother. She stopped, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of what was being offered, what was being asked. Take all the time you need, Marcus said. But Elena, understand. This isn't charity. This isn't me trying to buy forgiveness or ease my conscience. This is justice. Delayed, imperfect, but justice nonetheless. Your father built this company as much as I did. More than I did. And you deserve to inherit what he created. Elena stood, her legs unsteady. The room that had seemed so elegant when she'd entered now felt surreal, like a stage set where nothing was quite what it appeared. She picked up her serving tray, that familiar weight grounding her, connecting her to the real world where she had 4 other tables waiting and a manager who was probably wondering where she'd disappeared to. I need to get back to work, she said, and her voice sounded strange to her own ears, distant and dreamlike. Elena, Patricia said, pulling a business card from somewhere and pressing it into Elena's hand. My personal cell phone is on here. Call me tomorrow. Or tonight if you can't sleep. We'll talk through all of this, answer every question. You don't have to face this alone. Elena nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She walked to the door, opened it, stepped into the corridor where the sounds of the restaurant rushed back. Laughter and conversation and the clink of silverware. The soundtrack of normal life continuing while hers had just been torn apart and reassembled into something unrecognizable. She made it to the service station before her knees gave out. She sat down hard on an overturned crate, her serving tray clattering to the floor, and pressed her hands over her face. She thought of 7-year-old Elena, watching her father unravel. She thought of 10-year-old Elena, hearing the news that the Coast Guard had found a body, that it was over. She thought of 15-year-old Elena, working her first job bussing tables to help with rent. She thought of 22-year-old Elena, studying engineering at night school because she wanted to understand what her father had created, wanted to follow in footsteps that had been erased from history. And she thought of tomorrow Elena, whoever that person would be, standing at a crossroads where every direction led somewhere impossible. Elena? You okay, hon? It was Marco, one of the other servers, a kind man in his 50s who'd worked at the Meridian for 20 years and knew everyone's story. You look like you've seen a ghost. She laughed, and it came out broken, slightly hysterical. Maybe I have, she said. Maybe I have. The apartment Elena shared with her mother and 2 roommates was in the Rainier Valley neighborhood, a 40-minute bus ride from the gleaming towers of downtown Seattle. It occupied the 2nd floor of a building that had been constructed in the 1970s and hadn't been updated much since. Linoleum that curled at the edges, windows that rattled in the wind, radiators that clanked and hissed but never quite produced enough heat. But it was home, or as close to home as anywhere had been since they'd lost the house in Ballard when Elena was 8. She arrived just after midnight, letting herself in quietly because Yuki and Tremaine, her roommates, both students at Seattle Central College, would be asleep. The living room was dark except for the bluish glow from the aquarium Yuki kept, full of neon tetras that darted like liquid jewels through plastic plants. Elena stood in that underwater light, Patricia's business card in her pocket feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds, and tried to decide what to do next. Her mother wouldn't be home for 3 more hours. Louisa worked the midnight to 8 shift at a downtown office complex, vacuuming conference rooms and scrubbing toilets and emptying trash bins full of the casual waste of people who made in a day what she made in a month. Then she'd come home, sleep for exactly 4 hours, and leave again for her afternoon job at the Safeway on Rainier Avenue, where she stood at a register scanning groceries until her feet swelled and her back screamed and her hands cramped from the repetitive motion. Elena had tried 1,000 times to convince her mother to quit one of the jobs, to let Elena take more shifts at the restaurant, to accept help. But Elena Vasquez had a pride that was both fierce and painful to watch. She'd been a paralegal once, before everything fell apart, had worn suits and carried a briefcase and thought she was building a future. After Rafael died, after the savings ran out and the lawsuit debts crushed them, she'd taken whatever work she could find. And she'd never stopped working, never stopped pushing, never stopped trying to build something stable for her daughter even as that effort hollowed her out from the inside. Elena moved through the apartment like a ghost, past Tremaine's bedroom where he slept with one arm flung over his face, past Yuki's door covered in anime stickers and postcards from Tokyo. Her own room was barely bigger than a closet, just enough space for a twin bed, a desk made from a door laid across milk crates, and a bookshelf sagging under the weight of engineering textbooks and the few photo albums her mother had saved from their old life. She sat on the bed, pulled out one of the albums, and opened it to a page she'd looked at so many times the plastic covering had gone cloudy. There was her father, Rafael Vasquez, standing in the driveway of their old house with Elena on his shoulders, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. He was young in this picture, maybe 30, with thick black hair and warm brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a t-shirt with a periodic table on it and jeans with holes in the knees, and he looked happy in a way Elena could barely remember him being by the end. There were other pictures too. Rafael at his desk, surrounded by blueprints. Rafael at Elena's 5th birthday party, covered in cake frosting. Rafael and Louisa dancing in the kitchen, her mother's head thrown back in laughter. These were ghosts now, fragments of a life that had existed before Marcus Webb and Patterson and Blake and the courts that had let a brilliant man be crushed by people with better lawyers. Except now that story was different. Now Marcus Webb had a face and a voice and his own pain. Now Elena knew about Catherine Webb and her gambling debts, about the choices people made when they were scared and desperate, about how quickly trust could become betrayal even when no one meant it to. She didn't know what to do with this information, didn't know how to carry both things at once. The anger she'd built her identity around and this new, uncomfortable understanding that the world was more complex than she'd been taught. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Patricia Chun. I hope you made it home safely. No pressure, but if you want to talk, I'm awake." Elena stared at the message for a long time. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard, composing and deleting responses. Finally, She wrote, "I need to know everything. Every detail about what happened, what the company's worth, what this would actually mean. Can we meet tomorrow?" The response came immediately. "My office. 10 a.m. I'll send a car. I can take the bus." "I know you can, but you shouldn't have to. Not anymore." Elena set the phone down and pressed her palms against her eyes. Not anymore. As if everything could change just like that. As if 23 years of struggle could be erased by a conversation in a private dining room. She wanted to believe it could be that simple. She also knew it couldn't. She must have dozed off, because when she woke it was to the sound of keys in the front door and her mother's familiar tread in the hallway. Slow, heavy, the walk of someone whose body had been used up. Elena glanced at her phone. 3:47 a.m. She got up, padding out to the kitchen where she found her mother standing at the sink, drinking water straight from the tap with the desperate thirst of someone who'd been breathing cleaning chemicals for 8 hours. Elena Vasquez was 52 but looked older, with gray threading through her black hair and deep lines around her mouth and eyes. She'd been beautiful once. Elena had seen the pictures, knew her mother had turned heads, had danced salsa in clubs and laughed easily and believed the world was fundamentally good. That woman was gone now, replaced by this version who moved carefully, as if her body might betray her at any moment, who smiled rarely and slept less. "Mija," Louisa said when she saw Elena. "What are you doing up? You have class in the morning." "Couldn't sleep," Elena said, which was true enough. "How was work?" "The same." Louisa dried her hands on a dish towel that was more holes than fabric. "Mr. Chen's office still smells like those terrible protein shakes. Someone left their lunch in a drawer on the 3rd floor. Found it growing things. The usual glamorous life." She said it without bitterness, just factually, the way someone might comment on the weather. Elena watched her mother move around the tiny kitchen, putting away the Tupperware she'd brought with her dinner, setting up the coffee maker for the morning. Louisa's hands trembled slightly. They always did now, a combination of exhaustion and the beginning of arthritis. She wore her cleaning uniform still, dark blue scrubs that smelled of industrial cleaner and sweat, with her name embroidered over the pocket in thread that was coming loose. "Mom," Elena said, and something in her voice made Louisa stop, turn, really look at her daughter for the first time since coming home. "What happened?" Louisa's voice sharpened with instant worry. The fear that lived just beneath her surface always. The terror that something else would be taken from her. "Are you hurt? Did someone?" "No, nothing like that. Something happened at work tonight. Something big." Elena pulled out a chair at their rickety kitchen table. The one they'd gotten from a yard sale 6 years ago. "Sit down, please." Louisa sat, her body folding into the chair like a marionette with cut strings. In the harsh fluorescent light of the kitchen, Elena could see every year etched into her mother's face. Every sacrifice, every night without sleep, every dream deferred or abandoned entirely. "Do you remember Marcus Webb?" Elena asked, though of course her mother remembered. Marcus Webb was a name that had been forbidden in their household for years. A curse, a ghost, the man who'd stolen everything. Louisa's face went very still. What about him? So Elena told her. She told her everything, about serving in the private dining room, about seeing Rafael's signature, about the glass shattering and the room clearing and Marcus's confession. She told her about Catherine and the gambling debts, about the patents filed in secret, about Marcus's cancer and his desire to make things right. She told her about the offer, 50% of his shares, public acknowledgement, Rafael's name restored to history. When she finished, Louisa was silent for so long that Elena started to worry. Then her mother stood, walked to the cabinet above the refrigerator, and pulled down a box that Elena had seen before but never been allowed to touch. It was metal, fireproof, the kind people kept important documents in. Louisa set it on the table with a heavy thunk and opened it with a key she wore on a chain around her neck. Always, even in the shower. Inside were papers, legal documents, yellowed newspaper clippings, handwritten notes. Louisa sorted through them with shaking hands until she found what she was looking for. A photograph, creased and faded, of Rafael and Marcus Webb standing together outside a garage, arms around each other's shoulders, both grinning at the camera with the unself-conscious joy of young men who believed they were about to change the world. "I kept this," Louisa said, her voice thick. "Even after everything. Even after the funeral, after the lawsuit, after all the years of hating him, I kept this picture because I needed to remember that once your father had a friend. That once he'd been happy. That once someone besides me had believed in him besides me." Elena took the photo, studying the faces. Rafael looked so young, so alive, so full of hope. And Marcus looked different too, softer somehow, without the hardness that came with decades of success and guilt. They looked like brothers, like partners, like people who would have died for each other. "What do you want to do, Mija?" Louisa asked. "This is your decision. You're an adult. You're smarter than I ever was. But I need you to understand something." She reached across the table, took Elena's hands in hers. "Your father would not want you to be consumed by this. By anger, by revenge, by the need to make Marcus Webb suffer. That's not who Rafael was. Even at the end, even when the depression had him so tight he couldn't breathe, he never wanted to hurt anyone. He just wanted to create things, to make the world better. That was all he ever wanted. But they destroyed him," Elena said, tears spilling over. "They took everything from him, from us. How can I forgive that?" "I'm not telling you to forgive," Louisa said firmly. "Forgiveness is personal, and it's yours to give or withhold. I'm telling you not to let the past eat your future. I'm telling you that if you take this offer, it's not for Marcus Webb. It's not even for your father. God rest him. It's for you. It's for the life you could have, the good you could do, the way you could honor Rafael's memory by doing exactly what he always wanted, using his work to help people." Elena looked at her mother, this woman who'd been bent but never broken, who'd sacrificed everything but never given up, who'd somehow managed to raise a daughter who believed the world could be better even after the world had proven itself cruel. "Will you come with me tomorrow?" Elena asked. "To meet with Patricia Chun? I can't do this alone." "You're not alone," Louisa said, squeezing her daughter's hands. "You've never been alone. And yes, Mija, I'll come with you. We'll face this together, like we've faced everything else." They sat there in the kitchen as the night deepened toward dawn, holding hands across a table that had witnessed 1,000 meals scraped together from whatever they could afford, 1,000 homework sessions, 1,000 moments of trying to build something good from the wreckage they'd been left with. Outside, the city was beginning to wake. Garbage trucks rumbling down Rainier Avenue, early buses hissing to stops, people heading to jobs that would wear them down but not break them. Not quite. Not yet. Elena thought about her father, about the Cascade System that bore someone else's name but carried his brilliance in every molecule. She thought about the 200 million people who had clean water because Rafael Vasquez had been brilliant and generous and trusting. She thought about what it would mean to stand up and say, "This was my father's work. This was my father's dream. And I'm going to carry it forward." "Mom," she said quietly, "tell me about him. Not about the end, not about the lawsuit. Tell me about who he was before all that." Louisa smiled, and it was sad but also genuine. The smile of someone accessing memories that hurt but were worth the pain. "He was magic," she said simply. "Your father was pure magic. He could fix anything, I swear, Mija, anything. Toasters, cars, relationships between neighbors who weren't speaking. He saw how things worked, not just mechanically but fundamentally. He understood systems, connections, the way everything fit together." She got up, poured them both coffee even though it was almost 4 in the morning, and sat back down. "When we first met, I was working at a law office downtown. My car broke down in the parking garage, and I was standing there staring at the engine like it might explain itself if I looked hard enough. And Rafael, he was there visiting a friend in the building. He just walked over and asked if he could help. 20 minutes later, my car was running. He wouldn't take money, wouldn't even take my number at first. Said helping people wasn't something you got paid for. It was just what you did." "How did you finally get him to go out with you?" Elena asked, even though she'd heard this story before. She needed to hear it again. Needed to remember that her father had been a whole person with a whole life. Not just a tragedy, not just a cautionary tale. "I tracked him down," Louisa said with a hint of the fierce woman she'd been. Found out where he worked, showed up with 2 coffees and an invitation to a salsa club. He said he couldn't dance. I told him I'd teach him. We went that Friday and Mija, he was terrible. Absolutely terrible. He stepped on my feet so many times I had bruises for a week. But he was laughing, and I was laughing, and by the end of the night, I knew I was going to marry him. Did he ever get better at dancing? Never, Louisa said, laughing through tears. But he kept trying. Every anniversary we'd go back to that club and he'd step on my feet and we'd laugh about it. He said he was proving that love was more important than coordination. They talked until the sky started to lighten, until Louisa had to get ready for her grocery store shift and Elena had to prepare for the meeting that would change everything. They talked about Rafael's terrible jokes, about the time he tried to cook dinner and set off the smoke alarm 3 times, about the way he'd sung off-key lullabies to baby Elena, about his habit of leaving encouraging notes in Louisa's lunch bag, little drawings of hearts and flowers and equations that spelled out, "I love you" in mathematics. By the time Louisa left for work, Elena felt steadier. She showered, put on the nicest clothes she owned, black slacks and a white blouse she usually reserved for job interviews, and braided her hair with hands that only shook a little. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror and tried to see what Patricia Chan had seen, what Marcus Webb had seen. Someone strong, someone capable, someone worthy of inheriting an empire. What she saw was a 22-year-old who was scared and angry and confused, who'd spent her whole life being told she was poor and powerless and lucky to have anything at all. But maybe that was exactly who needed to have power. Maybe that was the point. Her phone buzzed. Car is outside. Black sedan. The driver's name is Robert. Take your time. Elena grabbed her backpack, the same one she'd been using since high school, with patches covering the holes and a broken zipper she'd fixed with a safety pin. She added Patricia's business card, her student ID, and the photograph of Rafael and Marcus that her mother had given her. Then she walked downstairs and out into the morning. The car was indeed black and sleek, and so clean it looked like it had been detailed about 5 minutes ago. The driver, Robert, was a kind-looking man in his 60s who opened the door for her with a smile and didn't comment on her worn backpack or the fact that she'd clearly never been in a car like this before. "Ms. Vasquez," he said warmly. "It's an honor. Patricia told me about you." "What did she tell you?" Elena asked, sliding into the back seat that smelled like leather and something expensive. "That you're about to change the world," Robert said simply. "Same as your father did." Elena didn't know how to respond to that, so she just nodded and looked out the window as Robert pulled away from the curb. They drove through Rainier Valley, past the taco trucks and corner stores and apartment buildings full of people like her. People who worked 3 jobs and rode the bus and dreamed of something better but never quite believed it would come. She watched her neighborhood slide past and felt the distance opening between who she'd been yesterday and who she might become tomorrow. The Webb Industries headquarters was downtown, a glass and steel tower that reflected the morning sun like a beacon. Elena had walked past it 100 times, had looked up at those windows and felt rage burning in her chest, had imagined her father looking up at the same building and feeling the weight of his defeat. Now she was going inside. Now she was going to sit in Patricia Chen's office and discuss the future of the company her father had helped create. Robert pulled into an underground garage, showed a pass to security, and drove to a private elevator bank. "This goes straight to the executive floor," he said. "Patricia's expecting you. You've got this, Ms. Vasquez." Elena stepped out of the car, walked to the elevator, and pressed the button. As she rose through the building, past floors full of engineers and accountants and marketers, past the laboratories where new versions of the Cascade System were being developed, past conference rooms where decisions were made that affected millions of lives. She thought about her father riding this same elevator 25 years ago, full of hope and trust and the belief that his friend would never betray him. She thought about Marcus Webb, dying of cancer, desperate to ease a guilt that had eaten at him for decades. She thought about her mother, about to start another shift at the grocery store, scanning items with hands that hurt and feet that ached and a heart that had somehow survived being broken completely. And she thought about herself, about Elena Vasquez, who was a waitress and a student and the daughter of a brilliant man, who'd learned to be strong because she'd had no other choice, who'd learned to be kind even when the world wasn't kind to her, who'd learned that sometimes the only way forward was to carry your pain and your anger and your hope all at the same time and keep walking anyway. The elevator doors opened onto the executive floor, and Patricia Chun was there waiting, wearing a charcoal suit and an expression that was both professional and genuinely warm. Behind her, through glass walls, Elena could see a conference room with a table that could seat 20 people, with windows that looked out over Elliott Bay, the same bay where her father had walked into the water with rocks in his pockets, where his body had drifted for 6 days before washing ashore. "Elena," Patricia said, "thank you for coming." "Your mother. She had to work," Elena said. "But she'll come later after her shift. She wanted me to tell you." Elena stopped, cleared her throat. "She wanted me to tell you that she's willing to listen. That's all she can promise right now. But it's more than she thought she'd ever offer." "That's more than enough," Patricia said. She gestured toward the conference room. "Shall we?" They walked together across polished floors, past abstract art that probably cost more than Elena's entire life savings, past offices where assistants looked up curiously at this young woman in her worn clothes carrying a backpack held together with safety pins. Elena held her head high. She thought of her father's hands. Engineer's hands, stained with solder and ink, hands that had built something beautiful and true. She thought of her mother's hands. Cleaner's hands, rough with chemicals, hands that had worked themselves raw to keep a roof over their heads. And she thought of her own hands, young and strong, that were about to reach out and take hold of something she'd been told could never be hers. In the conference room, there were 3 other people waiting, 2 lawyers and an accountant, all of whom stood when Elena entered. Patricia made introductions, but Elena barely heard the names. She was looking at the documents spread across the table, at the screens showing stock prices and financial reports, at the architectural renderings of water treatment facilities in Kenya and Bangladesh and Peru, all of them using technology her father had invented, all of them saving lives he would never know about. "Before we begin," Patricia said, "I want to make something clear. Everything we discuss today is confidential, but it's also your choice. You can walk away at any time. You can take weeks to think about this. You can bring in your own lawyers, your own advisors. No one here is trying to pressure you or rush you. We're here to give you information and help you make the best decision for yourself." "Understood." Elena nodded. She pulled out the photograph, Rafael and Marcus, young and hopeful, and set it on the table where everyone could see it. "That's my father," she said, and her voice was steady, clear, certain. "That's Rafael Vasquez, and I'm here because I want to understand exactly what he built, and exactly what it's become, and exactly what it means to take responsibility for it. So let's begin." Patricia smiled, a real smile, not a corporate one, and pushed a folder across the table. "Let's begin," she agreed. "Let's tell you everything." And outside the windows, the city sparkled in the morning light, and somewhere in a Safeway on Rainier Avenue, Luisa Vasquez paused while scanning groceries and felt, for the first time in 23 years, something that might have been hope. The numbers made Elena's head spin. She'd always been good at math, had inherited her father's facility with equations and calculations, but this was different. This was wealth on a scale she couldn't quite process. Webb Industries was worth $8.7 billion. Marcus Webb personally controlled 42% of the company's shares through various trusts and holdings. 50% of that, what he was offering to transfer to Elena, represented approximately $1.8 billion. She said the number out loud. $1.8 billion. "Give or take," Patricia said calmly, as if they were discussing the price of groceries. "It fluctuates with the market, obviously. Some days it's more, some days less. But that's the approximate current value, yes." Elena stood up, walked to the windows, pressed her forehead against the cool glass. Down below, people moved through the streets like ants, each of them living their own private struggles, each of them unable to see the drama unfolding 40 stories above them. She thought about her student loan debt, $30,000 that had felt like an impossible mountain. She thought about her mother's medical bills from last year's emergency room visit. $4,000 they were paying off at $50 a month. She thought about the way she'd calculated every purchase, every bus fare, every cup of coffee. $1.8 billion. The number was obscene. It was violent in its magnitude. "I think I'm going to be sick," Elena said. Patricia was beside her immediately, guiding her to a chair, pressing a glass of water into her hands. "Breathe," she said firmly. "In through your nose, out through your mouth. You're not the first person to have this reaction, and you won't be the last. Sudden wealth is traumatic. People don't talk about that, but it is." "How can money be traumatic?" Elena managed between breaths. "Because it changes everything," Patricia said. "Every relationship, every assumption about yourself, every plan you'd made for the future. It's like suddenly discovering you've been living in a one-room apartment your whole life and the wall opens up to reveal a mansion you didn't know existed. It's disorienting. It's terrifying. And it's okay to feel that." One of the lawyers, David something Elena thought, cleared his throat. "Ms. Vasquez, I think it's important to note that receiving these shares doesn't mean you'd have immediate access to $1.8 billion in cash. The majority of the value is tied up in company stock. If you tried to sell it all at once, you'd crater the stock price and potentially destroy the company. This is a long-term asset, not a lottery win." "Right?" Elena said, laughing shakily. "Because the difference between immediate access to $2 billion and delayed access to $2 billion is definitely the issue I'm struggling with right now." Patricia smiled slightly. What David's trying to say, perhaps inelegantly, is that this gift comes with responsibilities. You'd be a major shareholder in a company that employs 12,000 people globally, that provides clean water to communities in 47 countries, that has contracts with governments and NGOs and relief organizations. Your decisions, or the decisions you'd make alongside the board of directors, would affect all of those people. That's the weight you'd be carrying. "Tell me about the board," Elena said, forcing herself to focus, to think beyond the impossible numbers. "Who are they? What would they think about this?" Patricia pulled up a document on one of the screens. "Webb Industries has 7 board members. Marcus is chair. I'm CFO and also serve on the board. Then there's Margaret Okonkwo. She runs our African operations. James Thornton, head of research and development. Sandra Park, chief legal counsel. Richard Carmichael, he represents our primary venture capital investors. And Father Miguel Santos. He's there as a community representative, runs a nonprofit that works with us on installation in developing nations. And they all know about this? About me? About my father?" "Not yet," Patricia admitted. "Marcus wanted to speak with you first, make sure you were willing before we brought it to the board. But Elena, I won't lie to you. This is going to be contentious. Richard especially will fight it. He doesn't care about justice or moral obligations. He cares about returns on investment, and he's going to see you as a risk. Young, inexperienced, potentially hostile to the company." "I am hostile to the company," Elena pointed out. Patricia corrected. "You were hostile when the company was something that had hurt your family. Now the question is, can you see it as something else? Can you see it as a tool you could use to do good, to honor your father's vision, to help people?" Before Elena could answer, her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "How is it going, Mija? I'm thinking of you. So proud of you. No matter what you decide." Elena showed the message to Patricia. "My mother has worked 3 jobs for 15 years to keep us alive. She's 52 years old and her hands shake from arthritis and she's never complained once. And now I'm supposed to tell her that I'm suddenly a billionaire? How do I even begin to explain that?" "The same way you'd explain anything difficult," Patricia said. "Honestly, directly, with love. Your mother raised you to be strong. She'll be strong for this too." The accountant, a thin woman named Rebecca with sharp eyes and sharper cheekbones, spoke up for the first time. "Ms. Vasquez, if I may, before you make any decisions, you should understand the full picture. The tax implications alone are staggering. Gift tax, potential estate tax, capital gains if you ever sell. You're going to need a team, lawyers, accountants, financial advisors, people you can trust absolutely, because there are going to be a lot of people who want a piece of this. Family members you haven't heard from in years. Friends who suddenly need loans. Charities, causes, investment opportunities. Everyone's going to want something from you. I don't have family members," Elena said flatly. My grandparents are dead. My father was an only child. My mother has a sister in Mexico we haven't seen in a decade. I've got 2 roommates and some people I go to school with. That's it. That's my entire circle. That's good, Rebecca said. Smaller circles are easier to protect. But Ms. Vasquez, Elena, you need to understand that your circle is about to expand dramatically whether you want it to or not. The moment this becomes public, you're going to become a target. For scammers, for opportunists, for people who genuinely believe they deserve a share of your wealth. You're going to need security, privacy protocols, maybe even to relocate. I can't relocate, Elena said immediately. My mother's job are here. My school is here. Our life is here. Your mother wouldn't need jobs anymore, David pointed out gently. And you could afford any school in the world. The enormity of it hit Elena again, and she had to close her eyes, had to breathe through the vertigo. Every single problem in her life, every source of stress and anxiety and exhaustion, could be solved with money. Her mother could retire. Elena could finish her degree. They could have healthcare, could have security, could have time to breathe and think and be human instead of survival machines grinding themselves down day after day. But it wouldn't bring her father back. Wouldn't give her the childhood she'd lost. The father who'd been at her 10th birthday party instead of at the bottom of Elliott Bay. Wouldn't erase the years of her mother's suffering. The permanent damage to Louise's hands and back and spirit. I need to know something, Elena said, opening her eyes and looking at Patricia directly. Marcus said this isn't about buying forgiveness. But what do you think? Honestly, is this guilt or justice? Patricia considered the question seriously and didn't give a quick or easy answer. I think, she said slowly, that it's both. I think Marcus has carried this guilt for 23 years and it's eaten him alive. I think he's dying and desperate to make peace with what he's done. But I also think, and this is important, Elena, I think he's right. I think your father was robbed. I think the company owes you this, regardless of Marcus's emotional state. Justice doesn't stop being justice just because the person delivering it has selfish motives too. And what about you? Elena asked. Why are you helping with this? What do you get out of it? That's a fair question. Patricia sat back in her chair, steepled her fingers. I've worked at Webb Industries for 18 years. I came on board in 2007, worked my way up from junior analyst to CFO. I'm good at my job, excellent at it, actually. I've helped grow this company into something remarkable. But I've always known, in the back of my mind, that there was something wrong at its foundation. I didn't know the details until Marcus told me 6 months ago, after his diagnosis. And once I knew, she paused. Couldn't unknow it. I couldn't keep profiting from a theft, even an old one, even a complicated one. So yes, I'm helping Marcus make this right. But I'm also helping myself sleep at night. It was the most honest thing anyone had said all morning, and Elena respected it. Okay, she said. Walk me through exactly what would happen if I agreed. Step by step. Don't leave anything out. For the next 3 hours, they did exactly that. They walked Elena through the share transfer process, the legal documents, the tax strategies. They explained how the board meeting would work, what questions to expect, how to handle the media attention that would inevitably follow. They showed her organizational charts, financial statements, and strategic plans. They explained that she wouldn't be expected to actually run anything day to day. That's what executives were for. But that she would have voting rights on major decisions, would be consulted on strategic direction, and would essentially become one of the most powerful people in the company overnight. We'd want you to join the board formally, Patricia said. Not immediately, you'd need time to learn, to get up to speed. But within 6 months, ideally, you'd bring a perspective no one else has. You understand what it's like to struggle, to be powerless, to be at the mercy of systems that don't care about you. That's valuable. That's important. And Marcus? Elena asked. Where does he fit into all this? Marcus is stepping down as CEO, Patricia said. That was already planned, regardless of this situation. The cancer treatment is brutal, and he needs to focus on his health. The board was going to announce it next month anyway. As for his ongoing role with the company, she hesitated. That's partly up to you. He'd retain his remaining shares and would likely stay on as board chair if his health allows. But if you don't want to work with him, if it's too painful, we can structure things so your paths rarely cross. Elena thought about the photograph, young Rafael and young Marcus, arms around each other, building a future together. She thought about betrayal and forgiveness and the complicated ways that people could hurt each other without being monsters, could make terrible choices without being irredeemable. I don't know yet, she said honestly. I need to meet with him again, need to hear more about what happened, about why he made the choices he made. She struggled for the right words. I need to understand him as a human being, not as a villain. Because if I'm going to take this, if I'm going to accept this responsibility, I can't do it while still seeing him as just the man who destroyed my father. I need more than that. That's fair, Patricia said. And Marcus will meet with you as many times as you need. He wants this to be right, Elena. Whatever that looks like. They broke for lunch. Sushi delivered from a restaurant Elena had walked past 100 times but never dreamed of entering. She ate mechanically, barely tasting the food, while her mind churned through everything she'd learned. The lawyers and accountant drifted away to give her space, and she was left alone with Patricia in the conference room. Can I ask you something personal? Elena said. Of course. Do you have children? Patricia's expression shifted, became softer and sadder. I had a daughter, Emily. She died when she was 16. Leukemia. I'm so sorry, Elena said, and meant it. It was a long time ago, 20 years. But you don't stop being a parent just because your child is gone. Patricia looked out the windows toward the bay. I mention it because I want you to know that I understand, at least a little, what it's like to lose someone before their time. To watch someone you love be destroyed by things beyond their control. Your father's death was different from Emily's, but the grief has universal qualities. The unfairness of it, the way it changes you permanently. Is that why you're helping me? Elena asked. Because you see your daughter in me? Maybe a little, Patricia admitted. But mostly because it's the right thing to do, and because I think you're remarkable. You're sitting here at 22 years old, discussing billions of dollars in corporate governance, and you're not asking what you can buy or how famous you'll become. You're asking about responsibility, about your mother, about whether you can trust us. That tells me everything I need to know about the kind of person you are. Elena felt tears threatening and pushed them back. She'd cried enough. What she needed now was clarity, strength, was the ability to think beyond her own emotions and see the bigger picture. Tell me about the Cascade System, she said. How does it actually work? I've read the papers, studied the patents, but I want to hear it from someone who understands it from the inside. Patricia's eyes lit up. She was an engineer at heart, even if her career had taken her into finance. Your father was a genius, Elena. The Cascade System uses a multi-stage filtration process that mimics natural water purification but accelerates it dramatically. Stage 1 is pre-filtration, removing large particulates, sediment, and biological contaminants. Stage 2 uses ceramic membranes with precisely calibrated pore sizes, small enough to catch bacteria and viruses, but large enough to maintain good flow rates. Stage 3 is where the real magic happens. Your father developed a photocatalytic coating using modified titanium dioxide nanoparticles that, when exposed to UV light, breaks down chemical contaminants at a molecular level. It's elegant, efficient, and scalable in ways that traditional water treatment isn't. And it works, really works, not just in laboratory conditions. It works brilliantly. We've installed Cascade systems in refugee camps, rural villages, disaster zones, even some municipal water treatment facilities in developing nations. The system can run on solar power, requires minimal maintenance, and produces water clean enough to meet WHO standards. Your father's work has literally saved lives. Hundreds of thousands of lives, maybe millions at this point. Elena felt something shift in her chest. Pride, yes, but also grief for what her father had never known, had never seen. He died thinking his work had been stolen and forgotten. He died not knowing that it was out there in the world, doing exactly what he'd hoped it would do. I want to visit one, she said suddenly. A Cascade installation. I want to see it working. Want to meet people who use it. I want to understand what my father actually built. I can arrange that, Patricia said immediately. We have installations all over the world. Where would you like to go? Elena thought about it. Somewhere my father would have cared about. Somewhere that really needs it. Kenya, Patricia said without hesitation. We have a major installation near Kakamega, serving about 20,000 people in rural villages. It transformed the region, reduced waterborne illness by 70%, freed up children from water hauling duties so they can attend school, allowed women to start small businesses instead of spending 6 hours a day walking to wells. It's everything your father dreamed of. Then that's where I want to go. Before I make any final decisions, before I sign anything, I want to see what his work actually means. Patricia nodded slowly. I understand. But Elena, I need to be straight with you. The situation with Marcus is urgent. He has maybe 6 months, probably less. If you're going to do this, if you're going to accept the shares and allow him to make this right, we need to move relatively quickly. Not tomorrow, not next week necessarily, but we can't take 6 months to decide. How long do I have? I'd say 30 days? Maybe 60 outside. Enough time to visit Kenya, to think carefully, to consult with advisors. But not enough time to drag it out indefinitely. Elena felt the pressure of that timeline, felt the weight of making a decision that would affect not just her own life but thousands of others. The web industry's employees. The communities served by the Cascade System. Her mother. The memory of her father. Okay, she said. 30 days. I'll visit Kenya. I'll meet with Marcus again. I'll think about everything you've told me today. And then I'll decide. That's all anyone can ask, Patricia said. They spent the rest of the afternoon going through more details. Security protocols, communication strategies, what Elena should and shouldn't tell people while the decision was pending. By the time 5 o'clock rolled around, Elena's head was pounding and she felt like she'd run a marathon. Patricia walked her down to the garage where Robert was waiting with the car. One more thing, Patricia said as Elena was about to get in. You've handled yourself remarkably well today. Better than most people would in your situation. But Elena, please talk to someone. A therapist? A counselor? Someone trained to help people process trauma and sudden life changes. This is a lot to carry alone. I have my mother, Elena said. Your mother is wonderful, I'm sure. But she's also part of this story, part of this pain. You need someone outside of it. Promise me you'll at least consider it. Elena nodded. I'll consider it. She climbed into the car, and Robert pulled out of the garage, back into the city. As they drove through downtown, Elena saw it differently now. Every building might as well have been made of her father's dreams. Every person on the street was potentially someone who'd benefited from his work without knowing his name. The city that had crushed him had also been transformed by him, in ways large and small, visible and invisible. Her phone rang. Her mother. Mija? Are you okay? I've been worried all day. I'm okay, Mom. Can you take a break? Can I come see you? I'm at Safeway until 8. But after that, yes. Come home. We'll talk. Elena asked Robert to drop her at the grocery store. She walked in through the automatic doors, past the produce section where her mother had stood for thousands of hours, and found Louisa at register 7, scanning items with the mechanical precision of someone who'd done this motion so many thousands of times it no longer required thought. When Louisa saw Elena, her face lit up. That pure, uncomplicated joy that mothers have for their children, regardless of circumstances. She finished with her customer, flipped her light to closed, and pulled Elena into a fierce hug. Tell me, Louisa said. Tell me everything. So Elena did. Right there in the Safeway, with customers flowing around them and music playing overhead and the smell of rotisserie chicken in the air, Elena told her mother about the $1.8 billion, about the board of directors, about Kenya, about everything. And Elena Vasquez, who had spent 23 years being strong, finally let herself cry. 3 weeks later, Elena stood in a village outside Kakamega, Kenya, watching children fill containers from a Cascade System water station. The water ran clear and clean, and the children laughed as they drank. And an old woman told Elena through a translator that before this system arrived, Her granddaughter had died from contaminated water. "Your father's work," Patricia said quietly beside her. "This is what he built." Elena knew then what her decision would be. On the flight home, she drafted a statement with Patricia's help. She would accept the shares. She would join the board. She would honor her father's name and carry his vision forward. Not for Marcus Webb's redemption and not even for the money, but because Rafael Vasquez had dreamed of bringing clean water to the world, and his daughter was going to make sure that dream lived on. When she told Marcus her decision in his hospital room 2 days later, he cried and thanked her and told her she was giving him the only peace he'd ever have. Elena didn't forgive him. Forgiveness would take time, maybe forever, but she understood him. And that was enough. 6 months later, Marcus Webb died peacefully, his guilt finally eased. And on that same day, Webb Industries announced a new board member, Elena Vasquez, daughter of co-founder Rafael Vasquez, whose name would now appear on every Cascade System installed worldwide. The past couldn't be undone. But the future could be built right. If the story moved you, if you connected with Elena's journey from loss to legacy, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories about justice, redemption, and the complicated ways we make peace with the past. Your support helps us tell stories that matter. Thank you for watching.